Cliff, over to you. You can start whenever you wish.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you all. And thank you for joining in these very difficult and challenging times. I'd like to start by expressing my special thanks to Mahir for having come up with the idea of presenting a lecture by Zoom and for having organized our meeting this afternoon.
Thank you.
The lecture which I'm about to present was originally intended for presentation at a MARC meeting, but I'm aware we may have some non-MARC Masons amongst us, and therefore let me reassure you that there will be no MARC secrets revealed this afternoon. Those that are members of the MARC degree may see some significance in things which are said, which perhaps are not recognized by those who are not yet MARC Masons, and any who are not, you're really missing out, and I strongly recommend the degree to you. So the title of my talk this afternoon, as you all know, is The Mark of a Mason. And I believe that it was originally written by worshipful brother Michael Kahn, past assistant grand sword bearer and past provincial grand orator in the province of Middlesex. I still haven't actually got a date for when it was first put together. But anyway, there's the title, and to launch into the talk. We are taught that when one of our ancient brethren, who was a Mason, executed a piece of work, such as preparing a stone for a place in a building, he placed his mark upon it, so that those in authority could tell at a glance which workman had prepared any particular stone in the building. This system of marking or signing work must necessarily have led to accurate workmanship, for where a man had to sign his work, he would be careful to see that it was worthy, and not such as might, at some future time, cause discredit upon him. In fact, we can easily imagine such a workman, when asked for information as to his ability and skill, referring a prospective employer, not to a previous employer, but to a particular building where his mark would bear testimony to his skill. A visit to the beautiful and stately Salisbury Cathedral, York Minster, or Westminster Abbey will show many masons' marks carved into the stones. Go to an old village church and carefully examine the stonework of the walls, piers, and arches. It is almost certain that before long, you will find some stones bearing curious marks. It may be a simple cross or X, or it may be some sort of W, and will be about 2.5 to 4 inches in length and breadth. It may be of any form, but it will almost certainly be some fairly straightforward geometric combination of straight lines. Curves were seldom used. Some of these marks appear to be scratched with a knife. Others are quite obviously made with a chisel. They are mason's marks and can be found in many other buildings, as well as the great ruins, still standing in European countries such as England, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. The earliest certain date for mason's marks in England is 1119, when a particular part of Norwich Cathedral was constructed. Marks were found on the arches there, which suggests that even then a large number of masons had individual marks. Our modern Freemasonry is just a memory of those operative masons of the Middle Ages, the builders of those ornate and beautiful examples of architecture, unsurpassed in the builder's art. However, Mason's marks have been found on structures far older than the one I've just mentioned, and they have been found throughout the Northern Hemisphere and range over a time span of more than 5,000 years. It is indeed remarkable that these marks are to be found in many countries, in passages of the pyramids, on the underground walls of Jerusalem, in Herculaneum and Pompeii, on Roman walls and Grecian temples, in Hindustan, Mexico, Peru, and Asia Minor. There has been, in the past, much discussion about the significance of the marks, and various theories have been put forward. But most modern scholars are now agreed that the Mason's mark, like other merchants' marks, were used as a sign of ownership or responsibility for the work done. The mason who put his mark on a stone admitted or claimed that he had worked that stone. To understand why this was necessary, we must glance for a moment at the organization of the building industry in the Middle Ages. It has often been said that monks and priests in those days built their own monasteries and churches, but this theory has proved to be incorrect. It is true that a body of monks might have built a simple structure to serve as a church, but such buildings were usually flimsy and made of wattle and mud. When a more permanent stone structure was needed, trained and skilled masons had to be called in to build it. In medieval times, guilds played an important role in towns, and indeed throughout the country, as they attempted to guarantee standards of work amongst their craftsmen. A group of skilled craftsmen in the same trade would form themselves into a guild and would attempt to make sure that anything made by a guild member was up to standard and was sold for a fair price. Membership of a guild was an honor, as it was a sign that you were a skilled worker. It also gave you some respect in society. And just as an aside, it's interesting to look back on those medieval guilds. They were originally known as mysteries, and that's carried on through the livery companies. My own livery company is today known as the Worshipful Company of Scriveners, but it started out in the Middle Ages as the mystery of the court letter writers, and the idea of the mystery and the use of that word for their collective name was, of course, that the secrets were only available to those who had been initiated or who had become an apprentice. Moving back to the wording of the lecture, some members of a particular guild would be chosen to check that the other members' work was up to standard. Those guild members whose work was poor or who were found to be cheating the public would be fined or made to do the work again at their own expense. The worst punishment was to be expelled from the guild, as it meant that you could no longer trade in the town. Only members of the guild could sell within a town, which was meant to keep work to a good quality. But the guild would also look after a member if he was sick, and would help the family of the guild members who had passed away. However, the stonemason's craft was like no other medieval craft, in that it was essentially nomadic. When a building was completed, or even if the work slowed down because of bad weather or financial problems, the workers went elsewhere in search of other building work. The masons had guilds, but in other crafts, the assumption behind the guild system was that there would be sufficient work in a town to keep a certain number of craftsmen employed. This just could not happen in the mason's craft. Even an important town like York, near good stone quarries, with its cathedral, many churches, monasteries, and the like, seems only to have provided regular work for a dozen or so masons. Of course, there were often times when many more masons were employed in York, but this would only last for a year or two, whilst some particular structure was being built. As it was coming to completion, the gang of builders would gradually break up. Perhaps one or two of the masons would stay in York, but the rest would soon be scattered far and wide. There would, however, be no absolute necessity to travel far, for if no one town could support many masons, an area probably could. Although during the very cold winter months, some masons would travel to other European countries. The problem was how to fit this building activity into the framework of the guild system, which was the only method of industrial organization known in the Middle Ages. The mason was on a different footing from, say, a weaver or saddler, whose product could be made in his own shop and then be sold in the town or at fairs or markets. A mason's work was made and remained where it was wanted. Again, unlike other craftsmen, the mason did not provide the raw materials, nor, for that matter, all his own tools. He expected his employer to provide stone and such things as barrows, hods, lifting tackle, and perhaps a smith to sharpen his scalping axes and chisels. Yet, in spite of these difficulties, the masons were organized into guilds. If a boy wished to become a mason, he would be apprenticed to a qualified mason. Even as an apprentice, he would probably have to travel around a fair amount, going with his master from one job to another. Part of his time would probably be spent at the quarries, for the mason had to learn how to select good stone, and anyhow, stone was often dressed before it left the quarries. In due course, he qualified as a skilled mason, and here the peculiarities of his craft begin to show themselves. Not for him the solemn ritual of a guild feast and then setting up shop. Ritual there would be, probably solemn admission in the lodge of a building where he worked, and we can be sure that there would have been some sort of feast, but there was no setting up of a shop. The new mason was taught various secret signs and passwords by which he could be recognized as a duly qualified mason, and it is probable that at this moment he would choose his mark. Armed with all this knowledge, he set off in search of work. From the position of an employer, if a parish decided that the church needed a new aisle and sufficient funds were at hand to begin the work, the first thing to do was to find a master mason, one who would set out the foundations, design the building, and prepare templates of the various mouldings required for the plinths, windows, piers, and so forth. How did the church wardens find their man? Probably by going to the nearest place where building was being done. Perhaps a cathedral or abbey, perhaps a castle or another parish church. Judicious inquiry would reveal that a particular mason was a good man. He would, of course, not be working as a master mason, as it's most unlikely that the church wardens would be allowed to take away the key man from another building. But there would probably be some mason working at the bench with enough theoretical knowledge to take charge of a new building. A cathedral or abbey would have a permanent master mason, chosen with considerable care and well paid, but an ordinary parish could not afford such luxuries. As the newly appointed master, the first thing to be done is to supervise the building of a lodge. This is not mason's work. Any sort of rough, open shed would have sufficed. He then goes off to the quarries, probably accompanied by the church wardens, to see about getting a supply of stone. This will, in due course, be delivered to the lodge, where most of the work will be done, although one or two masons may be sent from time to time to the quarry to dress stone and thereby save the cost of transporting the undressed material. If, as often happened, the stone was transported by water, a supplementary lodge might be set up where it landed. The next problem that faced the master mason was recruitment of labor. He needed skilled and unskilled workers. The laborers he could probably get in the local village, but the former would be more difficult to find, though possibly the master mason might bring one or two skilled men with him from his last job. How the news got around that a building was being constructed in some remote village or town in the countryside is one of the minor mysteries of the Middle Ages. Let us grant, however, that in some fashion our newly admitted apprentice hears that a church is being built. He packs up his tools, his scalping axe, chisels, square, plumb line and compasses, and presents himself at the lodge of the new building, where he asks for work. Now, how is the master mason to know that the man presenting himself is a mason and not an impostor? The tools are some guarantee, but the man may have stolen them, or a genuine mason may have had to sell his tools during a spell of unemployment. And he may come without tools when he's first seeking work. It is here that the peculiar organization of the mason's craft becomes obvious. The mason seeking work will knock at the lodge door in a prescribed way, and he will know the correct responses to the ritual questions that the master puts to him. If there is no work for him, he will get a meal and a bed of sorts in the lodge, and probably some advice as to where he may have a chance of finding work in the district. So the next morning he sets off to the next lodge, hoping for better luck there. If there is work, the new man is taken on, but the master mason still has to size him up. He may or may not be competent to tackle the more difficult jobs, to cut an elaborate molding, or still less, to carve a grotesque or a gargoyle. So at any rate, for a time, he will probably be set to do plain walling, with perhaps a few simple moldings. And he would be expected to mark his stones, so that the master mason can check his workmanship. That, in brief, is the reason for the mason's mark. There are certain questions which obviously arise, and the first is whether there was any sort of register of marks. If so, none have survived, and it seems, in any case, unlikely. The difficulty about imagining a central or even regional registers of masons' marks is that it would have served no particular purpose. The criterion of a man's right to call himself a mason was his knowledge of the secret ritual of the craft, and no master mason was likely to want to go miles to find out if the mark claimed by some applicant were genuine or not. After all, masons traveled very extensively. We hear of French masons in England, Hungary, Germany, Italy, and Spain, and of English masons in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia. Under these circumstances, no register of marks would have served a useful purpose. There is also a possibility that two masons might use the same mark, but this is more remote than one might think. Many borough archives contain medieval documents signed by large numbers of citizens at a time when most men signed by making a mark. Although out of some 50 marks, several may be similar, it is very rare, even in documents like guild rules, which were often signed by many generations of newly admitted brethren, to find any two which are absolutely identical. So it is a reasonable assumption that if we find an identical mason's mark in two churches, we are looking at work done by the same man, unless some very obvious discrepancy in date makes it certain that this is not possible. Another question arises, and that is why, if every mason marked his stones, do we not find more marks in medieval buildings? Here, there are 2 points to be considered. The first is that it is unlikely that all stones were marked. The mark does not seem to have borne any relation to piecework, where a mason was paid a fixed rate for the work he produced, for the mason was usually paid by the day. Piecework did occur occasionally, but when it did, it was more often in the nature of a subcontract to a master mason, who agrees to build a certain part of the building for a fixed fee, and he would probably have paid his men by the day. The mark, as has been suggested, was a check of workmanship rather than work done, and it is quite likely that once a man's capacity was recognized, he ceased to mark his stones, except perhaps for very elaborate moldings, on which he would make his mark with a certain pride of craftsmanship. When there are only a few regular masons on a building, we find fewer marks than we do in places like Eton College, which we know was built by a large number of impressed workmen. Another reason for the absence of marks is that stones may have been checked before they were built in. It was not necessary to mark the face of a stone which was exposed. And of course, the stones have 6 faces, so the odds are at least 6 to 1 against the mark being visible, even if the stone was marked at all. Often too, the original face of the stone has weathered away or been refaced in cleaning or restoration of the stonework. So for a variety of reasons, the number of mason's marks to be found in a building is less than one might suppose. It is also surprising how long something may remain unnoticed until it is first discovered. There is a story about an old priest in a church who, when a number of mason's marks were pointed out to him, was said to have remarked, "I've probably walked through this church 4 times a day, 28 times a week for years, and I've never noticed them. Now I can't look anywhere without seeing them everywhere." The modern mark degree registers a mark to each member, and as we know, it is usually quite straightforward mark made up of lines. Although in other constitutions, notably Australia, it takes the form of a monogram of the member's initials. But whatever form it takes, it is our personal Mason's mark, and it is, of course, the Masonic equivalent of our signature. It represents our name, our character, our integrity, and our skills. When we make our mark, we stand up to be counted. By it, we say in effect, "This is where I stand, and this is my work. I guarantee its quality, and I am proud of the workmanship it shows." We sometimes hear it said of a person that he has left his mark, meaning that he has made a lasting impression on some institution or field of endeavor. I do believe that we can proudly say that many Freemasons have most certainly left their mark on society. We only have to think of George Washington, Winston Churchill, Alexander Fleming, Rudyard Kipling, Robert Burns, Mozart, Beethoven, and so on. However, not all of us can leave such a distinctive mark, but we can contribute towards the building of a better society. One of our ancient operative ancestors, in cutting his mark on a stone for Salisbury Cathedral, left a memorial which said, "I had a part in this beautiful house of God. By being more responsible citizens, better husbands, more compassionate fathers, more dutiful sons, we can leave our mark on society by discharging our responsibilities to God, our country, our neighbor, and to ourselves." In conclusion, I would suggest that the world would often judge us as Freemasons by our words, our actions, and by our mark as a Mason. Brethren, that is the end of the lecture, and I hope that you found something of interest in and amongst that. As I said, I really do enjoy that lecture.
Cliff, thank you very much on behalf of all the brethren. Brethren will now take questions. If you want to ask any questions to Cliff, please unmute yourself, ask your question, and mute yourself back again. Thank you.
Cliff, it's Tom.
Hi, Tom.
You said at one point you wondered how the news that there was building work available at a certain place, how it was spread around the countryside.
Yeah.
There would be people with horses and messengers delivering all sorts of communication roundabout. So it could be there was a medieval sort of post office, postman doing something like that.
Yeah, indeed. It's just a question of how much interest the general public would take in building work. News did travel.
Cliff, hi. You said, and I think you're right, in that Mason's marks are usually linear in nature. But I was recently at a cathedral in Portugal, and it was very interesting to see that a lot of the marks there were based around the letter P, have had curvature in them, and a lot more of them were visible than normal. Usually, as you say, they're on hidden face of stone. Do you think that there were differences in the way that marks were inscribed in different parts of Europe?
Yes, I think that's possibly the case. And also, of course, many of the Mediterranean countries use the so-called Chi Rho symbol, the XP symbol, very extensively, certainly on religious buildings. The difficulty, of course, is how you chisel a curve. Very easy to chisel a straight line, not so easy to chisel a curve. And I think that's probably the main reason.
Indeed, you're correct. Curvature is a lot more time consuming. It puzzled me at the time why there was such a plethora of marks with a curve, because it's, as you say, Mason's marks are usually straight lines, quick and easy.
Yeah.
In Scotland, in 1970 something, when I was made a mark man, we were allowed to create our own mark in our lodge, and I tried to be as creative as I could, and I did TQ in the form of, you know, the T and the Q as a large square. Someone has subsequently said to me, "Well, that's a triangle. That's not allowed." But it didn't start like that. It was actually a square for the Q, because it had to be straight lines with the T dissecting it. That's my mark, and it's quite interesting when I signed the book in England to see so many of these strange, what's the word? The alphabet, the sort of cryptic alphabet that's used. This is a lot easier to remember.
Yeah, it's quite interesting at down here in Hampshire and Isle of Wight. It's very common to use the Masonic alphabet that you see in the back of the ritual book and to take the letters from the person's initials and combine those marks from the Masonic alphabet to make up their mark.
I have heard that triangle.
Hello, Philip. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. Hello, Sergey.
Sergey, yeah. Hi, Cliff. Thank you for
Hi.
the lecture. Thank you for the lecture. Very nice. There is a lecture at the end of the ritual book about the Masonic alphabet, and it shows you how the initials are derived. And there are numerous applications that can be done. It's very, very simple. I did present that at one of the lodges some time ago. And obviously I suggest that members actually look at it and check their mark against that.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Any other question, brethren?
Not really a question, but just a follow up on what you just said. I am a Surrey Mark Mason, and I do have a triangle in mine as well, although it's taken exactly from the Masonic cipher.
All right. Yeah.
But that is 3 letters of my initials. That's SPR.
It looks like a play school thing from children's TV. I love it.
Yeah, I'm quite proud of my mark, which is why I wanted to show it. And obviously, when you first go in, you don't know. I didn't even know that it was a mark that was going to be offered to me. So I got given 3 little symbols, and the others were exactly as been alluded to already, squiggles of straight lines. And that was one of the pictures, and I grabbed it.
Excellent.
Florin, what in Romania? What's your mark?
Well, I have to show it's my name, but it's the I took it when I've been advanced. Hello, everybody from Bucharest, Romania. It's the initials of my name. It's from the Masonic alphabet. That's the way I got it when I've been advanced in actually in Monmouthshire in Welsh.
Excellent.
Cliff, it's James here, James Deller.
Hi, James. How are you doing?
I'm right, and you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
The question, I guess, to everybody in some respects is, do we have any guidance or suggestions to the registrar of marks actually to help them when they're preparing the marks? I know Tom just suggested how his was produced. Some take it that they use the Masonic alphabet from the back. But do we have anything as a province to give some guidance so we actually get a bit more variety?
I've never seen anything like that. I have been secretary and register of marks many times for many years. I don't know whether Tom has come across any provincial guidance anywhere.
No, I've never seen any. I wish my deputy was here. I would give that question to him to answer.
It just seems, because obviously it's your opportunity to make your mark, and actually, if you're given one, the chances are that with initials, that somebody else, conceivably in the province, if not further afield, will actually have the same mark.
Yeah, that is addressed in the modern ritual, of course, which says that the mark.
I'm on the train, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the current wording is that the mark chosen should not be the same as that of a brother in the same lodge. So it's been scaled back to reduce the modern day likelihood of duplication.
Yeah, Cliff, I always try and be creative with mine, but I must probably do about 10 or 11 before I pick 3. just to try and make it as simple as possible as well.
How do you find material for 10 or 11? My lodge typically does a man's full initials and his first and last initial. How do you find 10 or 11?
I just sit and play with it for about an hour and eventually come up with a 3.
I'm feeling quite deprived here because I was given the choice of 2 to choose from, but I'm quite happy with the one that I got.
Yeah, so I got given a choice of 3, and I got the one that didn't look like any other football team, so I was quite happy with it.
I was given the choice, but they were all the same.
Yeah, what you may find is that a lot of secretaries using the Masonic alphabet write out the candidate's name, initials, and they do it 3 times on a piece of it, and then they turn the paper one way, 90 degrees, 160 degrees, 180 degrees, and doesn't matter which one the candidate picks, the secretary always knows which one he's going to be sending up to Grand Lodge to be registered.
No, I don't think the secretary of my Mark Lodge does it quite that way.
I'll have a word with him the next time I speak.
About that and many other things, I would have thought.
But it's James again. It has obviously generated a bit of a discussion there as to actually there's so many different ways things are being done, and it is an opportunity for creativity. Certainly, I actually chose and made up my own mark, and that's why I was really pleased to be able to use my initials to actually achieve that. Whereas I've seen some come out and thinking, well, I wouldn't want that next to my name in the book because it kind of looks a bit messy.
Maybe that explains why quite often the mark isn't after the signature in the book.
Am I the only one then who actually keeps his mark in his wallet so he doesn't forget it when he has to write in the book?
Mine's in my wallet.
Mine's in my ritual book.
I took a picture of my one and keep it on my phone.
Good idea there, Paul.
I also created a little picture, and it's on my email signature when I make Masonic emails.
I chose the simplest one so I wouldn't forget it.
A friend of mine made me a wooden keystone with my mark on, and it's on my desk, so I see it every day.
Nice, I like that.
There we go. Proof. My mark. Got that.
Mine is kept in my wallet. I have to say, I was only given my certificate at the last meeting of Hibernia, Mark, which was the day before the lockdown. And the moment of dread when my certificate was unfolded and I was asked, "Is that your mark?" And all I could answer was, "Probably," having not yet committed it to memory.
Well,
Hello?
I think that's followed by the words, "It is now."
Yes, quite.
Hello, Cliff.
Hello there.
Hi, Cliff. This is Ugel from Gallipoli Lodge.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the very interesting lecture. I just wanted to add something on account of a lot of Turkish brethren being online today. I have found several years ago a Turkish academic paper on Ottoman stonemasons, and it was very interesting to read that Ottoman stonemasons had their marks as well and worked exactly the same way as you mentioned for the cathedral builders in Europe. So just a very interesting note that Masons, or the Masonic traditions, if you like, have been universal as well as being very ancient.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that addition. Interesting piece of information.
As another aside, well done. But I'm quite impressed with the number of brethren who have got one of these special backgrounds. I've tried to do it, but it says my computer doesn't have the functionality to be able to do it. Maybe I need a newer model. But yes, very, very good. Adam Spivak, I take it you're not on a beach somewhere.
Maybe James didn't really on the train.
But I see that Uchel and Murat have got the same background. Have you colluded on this?
Yes, we have.
But this is my view. This is my view out of my window.
I have one question. Hello.
Yeah.
I will say hello to all the brothers here. I'm from Düsseldorf. My name is Bora, and I'm from Namık Kemal Lodge in London. Mark Bell. My question is, what's the reason that the Mark Masonry came to Germany too late? I think too late, and also there are only not so much lodges here. I think we have 20 lodges in Germany. What's the reason of this?
I'm not sure. I think that the position in Germany, I'm sure others will know, is that it's actually a sovereign Mark Grand Lodge. Is that right, Tom? I believe.
I really don't know.
I believe it is in the same way that Switzerland is, and I'm not really sure for the reason for that.
Cliff, they do have a provincial lodge as well in Germany. They got a provincial Grand Lodge, which is attached to the Mark Mason Hall.
Right, so they have both.
Yeah.
Oh. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, there are 10 Mark and 10 Royal Mariner lodges under the Grand Lodge of Mark Mason of England and Wales in Germany.
That's right.
I don't know anything other than it's in the yearbook.
It was constituted 1980, 10 Mark and 10 Ram lodges. That's right.
What I do know is that Michael Cooper, the District Grand Master, is one of the most brilliant visitors. He comes to all the Grand Lodge meetings, and I see him a lot at other meetings too. It's very, very well-known face on the English Mark circuit.
Yes, I've met him abroad a number of times, particularly at the meetings of the Swiss Sovereign Mark Grand Lodge.
It's James again. I've got a question probably for Tom and maybe for Cliff. I think this has been absolutely fantastic this evening to be able to do something. So part one of the question is, are we going to do any others? And part two is, even when we are back meeting in our lodges, is there any reason why we can't continue to do this? Because it's a fantastic opportunity of bringing to people conversations.
Yeah, I think there's probably more than one answer to this. One of the answers that I will give, though, is that because of the current lockdown and the current emergency situation, a lot of people haven't got a lot in their diaries. Therefore, it has been relatively easy to get so many people together on this Zoom meeting. I think if once we're back in normal working, and I'm looking around all the young people on this Zoom meeting, you will be at work. But yeah, in terms of getting people together for a committee meeting, I think business has discovered this a long time ago. Rather than paying a lot of people to travel, from different parts of the country, they do have audio meetings, and Zoom does seem to be a good idea. There are some concerns around the security of this particular software, but we're not discussing anything that's particularly sensitive. We're not giving signs. We're not doing anything too private, so that there's no huge issues with it. One of the disadvantages it has is that you can't practice a ceremony. We can't do anything other than sit in front of a camera, still talk and listen. And that isn't always the most interesting way to put over presentation. Nothing wrong with what Cliff did today, but in a lodge situation, you would have the opportunity to move around and perhaps to produce a picture or a prop to support what you're presenting.
Yeah, the picture prop side of it can be done. You can link into your computer's desktop and you can put up PowerPoints at the same time as you're putting up your photograph. I haven't actually done it, but I've been told that it can be done.
Another quick answer to the question. I've just sent a message, a chat through chat option of this Zoom program with the Facebook address of Mark Master Masons. This is a private group which has over 3,000 members. I might be wrong, there's another one, but there is General Mark Master Mason Group is a private group where we can announce the next meetings. We will hopefully have another meeting next Tuesday. I'm waiting to get the confirmation from our presenter. That will be again around about same time, 5 o'clock, but we will announce it through the private Facebook pages where you can find the link and the password to join any particular meetings. Brethren, if you have any other questions, this is our last 5 minutes left, so you can please fire up to either Cliff or our Provincial Grandmaster Tom.
I think one of the things that I will take away as an action is to speak to Grand Secretary and on guidance for the marks. I think it was James that made the point. What real guidance is there? I'll see if there is any more learned response to that from the fourth floor.
It is usually a catalyst for when people start knowing there's people they can talk to. They can then start building up questions to ask on another occasion. So the idea of being able to meet up on a regular basis gives you a chance of learning, but also some of these talks, you must be some way of recording them, so at a later stage you could come back and hear them again. Maybe other people put lectures on for people to listen to.
Adam,
Adam,
yes, the meeting is recorded. I will share a link through, again, the Facebook page where you can join or you can download and watch the video over again.
Oh, it's brilliant. Thank you very much for doing that, Mahir.
Brethren, if you don't have any other questions, we will end the meeting. I'm aware some of our other brethren will have other meetings in Zoom they told me about. So please, this is your last chance. If you have any questions, do ask now.
I just say thank you, Cliff. That was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Can I say
My
thank you
pleasure.
as well?
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thanks, Cliff.
Well done, thank you.
Thanks, Cliff.
Well,
Thanks, Cliff. That was an interesting talk.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye then.
Well, we are losing everyone.
Everybody's ready for a beer, including me.
That's good. That's
Well,
good.
well deserved anyway.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Those brethren still on the line, thanks very much for joining. And we'll be sharing the next meeting's link through the Facebook pages. Hope to see you all again.
Okay,
We'll be
many
there.
thanks, Mahir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for organizing and thank you, Cliff.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you for the organization.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
stay safe. Yeah.